The Justice Department has released a new batch of files in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. The latest batch of all of the materials, they total about 10,000 pages, and they offer new details on the financier's associates, including President Donald Trump. CBS's Olivia Rinaldi has the story.
Newly released documents include court records, emails, news clippings, photos, and hundreds of video files. One Justice Department email says then private citizen Donald Trump flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane many more times than had previously been known. According to the email, Trump is listed as a passenger on at least 8 flights between 1993 and 1996, including at least 4 that co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell was on board. The email also notes Trump flew on 2 occasions with women described as potential witnesses in a potential Maxwell case. In a likely already public criminal complaint filed against Jeffrey Epstein's estate in 2020, a Jane Doe alleges that when she was 14 in the mid-90s, Epstein introduced her to Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
All right, everyone, Adam is here. So what just happened, guys? There's a category of information so dangerous that powerful men spend fortunes and entire careers keeping it buried. Armies of lawyers, procedural mazes, loyalists whose only job is to obstruct, delay, and redact. They build walls. They cultivate protectors.
It's important to note that President Trump has never been charged in connection with Epstein and has tried to distance himself from him. And there's no criminal wrongdoing alleged in these newly released files. The Justice Department released a statement saying some of the documents in Tuesday's release contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election.
I actually threw him out of Mar-a-Lago.
On Monday, President Trump once again accused Democrats of using the Epstein controversy as a distraction.
What this whole thing is with Epstein is a way of trying to deflect from the tremendous success that the Republican Party has.
And they live in quiet terror of the one moment they cannot plan for. When every wall falls at once, every loyalist proves insufficient, and the thing they spent a lifetime hiding becomes public knowledge that no power on earth can undo. That moment has arrived for Donald Trump. The Epstein files are out, not fragments, not redacted excerpts carefully curated to reveal nothing. Not the controlled releases that previous administrations used to create the appearance of transparency while concealing everything that mattered. The complete archive.
The Justice Department has now released a big new batch of documents in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, and these include new details about Epstein's one-time friendship with President Trump. Look, there is a lot to go through. We said it's like more than 10,000 pages, so we're digging through this. But this is what is seen so far. In a 2020 email, an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York wrote that Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet, quote, more times than previously has been reported, at least 8 times between 1993 and 96. And on a flight in 1993, according to the email, there was just 3 passengers, Trump, Epstein, and what's described as a 20-year-old woman.
3.5 million pages of documents, 2,000 videos. The entire investigative record that the FBI accumulated, that the Department of Justice possessed, that multiple administrations promised to release and then found reasons not to. It is all public now. Every flight log, every communication, every email chain, every investigative lead, every witness statement, every piece of evidence that Jeffrey Epstein's vast network of powerful connections spent decades ensuring would never be assembled in one place where ordinary citizens could examine it.
The Department of Justice releasing its remaining documents from the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Deputy Attorney General Todd Bland saying the records will be posted throughout the day, including more than 2,000 videos, more than 180,000 images, some of the material so explicit you have to verify being an adult before you can actually access it.
Many of Epstein's survivors have been publicly pushing for years to have these documents come out, but it took a law passed with near unanimous support in Congress to finally bring these documents to light.
And Donald Trump's name appears in those files more than 1,000 times. Not dozens of passing mentions that could be dismissed as the casual intersections of wealthy men moving through the same social circuits. Not hundreds of references that might be explained away as the normal documentation of business relationships. More than 1,000 separate documented instances where the name Donald Trump intersects with the world of Jeffrey Epstein. Flight logs showing Trump aboard the Lolita Express on more occasions than he ever admitted.
Maryland Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin is the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. He spoke to reporters on Capitol Hill following his review of the unredacted Epstein files held by the Justice Department. During his nearly 15 minutes of remarks, he accuses the DOJ of making unnecessary redactions that he says appear to protect President Trump and Victoria's Secret CEO Les Wexner, among others.
Communications where Epstein himself invokes Trump's name as a guide for handling crisis. Evidence connecting Epstein's activities to Mar-a-Lago. FBI tips that mention Trump in contexts that will fuel investigations for years to come. And all of it, every single page and video and recording, released because of a law that Donald Trump himself signed. The poetic justice is almost too perfect to be believed. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act with bipartisan support. Democrats wanted full disclosure for obvious reasons. Republicans who supported it thought they were demonstrating commitment to accountability, showing that no one would receive special protection, proving that the party of law and order meant what it said. Trump signed the bill into law because he believed he could control what happened next. He had Pam Bondi installed as Attorney General. He had Kash Patel positioned at the FBI. He had loyalists throughout the Department of Justice who understood that their primary function was to protect him from exactly this kind of exposure. The law would require release, but Bondi would handle the redactions. She would find the national security justifications, the privacy concerns, the ongoing investigation exemptions. She would release enough to satisfy the letter of the law while concealing everything that actually mattered. That was the plan. The plan failed catastrophically. Bondi tried. She released partial documents with heavy black bars obscuring names and details. She filed motions for delays. She invented procedural obstacles. She did everything a loyal attorney general could do to prevent the full unredacted archive from reaching the public. But the courts were not cooperating. Judges looked at the Transparency Act, read its clear language, examined the legislative history, and concluded that Congress meant what it said. Full release. No exemptions, no redactions, no more delays. The public had a right to know what was in those files, and no amount of executive branch obstruction could override that right. Bondi kept stalling anyway, hoping something would change, hoping Trump would find a way to protect her, hoping the political winds would shift. They did not shift. She faced contempt charges. She got fired, and after she was gone, the last barrier crumbled. The files came out. Complete, unredacted, everything. Let me take you inside what these files actually contain because the scope is almost impossible to comprehend. 3.5 million pages is not a document release. It is an archive dump of such magnitude that it will take teams of investigators, journalists, and researchers years to fully process everything that has just become public. 2,000 videos add visual evidence to the documentary record. Recordings that show who was where and when and with whom. And threaded through this vast archive, appearing again and again in contexts that range from the merely embarrassing to the potentially criminal, is the name Donald Trump. The flight logs alone destroy every version of the story Trump has told about his relationship with Epstein. He has always admitted to knowing Epstein, because complete denial would have been impossible given the extensive documentation of their social intersections in Palm Beach and New York. But he has consistently minimized the relationship. Casual acquaintances, ran in the same circles, knew him like everyone in that world knew everyone else. Nothing special, nothing close. And specifically, he claimed he flew on Epstein's plane only a handful of times, just hitching rides between Florida and New York when it was convenient. The flight logs tell a different story. More trips than admitted, more destinations, international travel. Multiple years of documented flights that paint a picture of regular, comfortable access to Epstein's private aviation. This is not the travel pattern of casual acquaintances who happen to share a social circle. This is the travel pattern of people who move through the world together. The communications are even more damning because they reveal how Epstein himself viewed Trump. In December of an election year, as the Miami Herald was preparing its explosive exposé of Epstein's crimes and the sweetheart plea deal that had allowed him to escape serious consequences, Epstein sent an email to journalist Michael Wolff. Wolff was working on stories about Epstein, digging into the network of powerful men who had protected him, examining how someone with Epstein's documented history could have received such lenient treatment, and Epstein, facing the collapse of the carefully constructed edifice that had shielded him for so long, asked himself a question that he then put into writing. What would Trump do? Read those words again and let their significance settle. Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender facing exposure for crimes involving the trafficking of minors, turned to Donald Trump as his model for crisis management. Not what would my lawyers advise, not what is the legally prudent course, not what would preserve whatever remained of my reputation. What would Trump do? Epstein had watched Trump navigate scandals for decades. He had observed how Trump attacked accusers, denied everything, claimed persecution, rallied supporters against the media, and somehow emerged from controversies that would have destroyed anyone else. Epstein wanted that playbook. He trusted Trump's judgment about how to survive accusations. He saw Trump as someone who understood the art of scandal survival at a level that no conventional advisor could match. That kind of trust does not develop between casual acquaintances. It develops between people who know each other well, who have discussed strategy and survival, who share an understanding of how power operates in the shadows. The FBI tips contained in the files add another dimension that will fuel investigation and speculation regardless of verification status. These are tips that came into the Bureau alleging assaults. They mention Trump by name. They describe specific incidents with dates and locations and details. They were never substantiated through full investigation, either because victims declined to proceed, or because evidence was insufficient, or because someone made sure the investigations never reached their natural conclusion. The tips are unverified allegations, not proven facts, but they exist in the files, and they are now public, and they will be examined by every investigator and journalist with access to the archive. Trump's pattern of lying about his Epstein connections undermines his denials. The existence of the tips, combined with the flight logs and communications that prove he minimized the relationship, creates a credibility deficit that no amount of Truth Social posting can overcome. The Mar-a-Lago connections documented in the files transform the classified documents case into something far more serious than a dispute over presidential records. We already knew that Trump obstructed the search of his property, that he moved boxes, that he directed staff to delete security footage, that he lied to investigators about what he possessed and why. The Epstein files now suggest that some of what Trump was hiding related to Epstein's visits to Mar-a-Lago. Evidence of when Epstein was there, evidence of who accompanied him, evidence of what occurred during those visits. The obstruction was not merely about protecting classified information, it was about concealing evidence of Trump's connections to a sex trafficker. That reframes the entire case. That elevates it from mishandling documents to active concealment of potentially criminal associations. That demonstrates consciousness of guilt in ways that a dispute over classification levels never could. The Steve Bannon connection documented in the files extends the Epstein network directly into Trump's inner circle. Bannon served as Trump's chief strategist, helped shape his political message, was present for the most sensitive conversations in the White House. And the files show frequent communications between Bannon and Epstein. Phone calls, meetings, emails. This contact continued after Epstein's conviction, after everyone knew exactly what Epstein was. Bannon maintained the connection. The questions this raises are obvious and unavoidable. What were they discussing? Was Bannon acting on Trump's behalf? Did Trump know about these communications? Did he direct them? Was the chief strategist of the Trump White House coordinating with a convicted sex offender as part of some larger arrangement? The files do not provide definitive answers, but they establish that the connection existed, that it was documented, and that Congress now has every reason to investigate. The congressional response has already begun. Subpoenas are being issued for Oval Office call logs. Lawmakers want to know whether Trump was communicating with Bannon about Epstein, whether he was coordinating with other associates connected to the network, whether he used presidential power to interfere with investigations, whether calls were made to the Department of Justice or the FBI trying to influence how Epstein evidence was handled. The call logs will reveal who Trump spoke to and when. They will not reveal what was said, but the pattern of contacts will speak volumes. A flurry of calls to Bannon around key moments in the Epstein investigation would be circumstantial evidence of coordination. Calls to DOJ officials followed by unusual investigative decisions would raise questions that demand answers. The subpoenas are just the beginning of what will become a sustained congressional inquiry into Trump's Epstein connections. Melania Trump's public denial tells its own story precisely because it is so unusual. The former First Lady almost never speaks publicly about controversies. She remained silent through impeachments, through indictments, through every scandal that consumed her husband's presidency. Her strategy has always been to stay in the background, to avoid the spotlight, to let Trump handle his own media battles while she maintained distance and deniability. So when she issued a formal statement declaring that she has no ties to Epstein, never met him, and possesses no information about Trump's relationship with him, the statement itself became news. It signaled that the Trump team considers this threat serious enough to warrant breaking her strategic silence. It signaled that they are worried about her being implicated, about her being called to testify, about her knowledge being used against Trump, and her careful wording, denying her own ties while conspicuously not denying Trump's ties, suggests she is drawing a line between herself and whatever her husband did. She is protecting herself. She is positioning herself as separate from Trump's actions, as someone who might cooperate if necessary, as someone who will not go down with him. The irony of Trump signing the law that forced this release cannot be overstated. He thought he could have it both ways. Appear transparent and cooperative by signing the Transparency Act while using Bondi and Patel to control what actually emerged. Look like he supported accountability while ensuring that accountability never reached him. But the institutional resistance he encountered, the courts that refused to accept redactions, the judges who ordered full release, the contempt proceedings that removed his loyalists from positions where they could protect him, all of it combined to defeat his strategy. The law he signed became the mechanism of his exposure. His signature is on the bill that made this disclosure mandatory. He created the instrument of his own destruction and then watched helplessly as it operated exactly as designed. The implications for impeachment are immediate and substantial. The House was already investigating Trump's obstruction of the Epstein files. Whistleblowers had testified that he personally ordered evidence buried. Bondi and Patel were already facing contempt for their roles in the cover-up. Now the files themselves are public, and everyone can see what Trump was so desperate to hide. His name appears more than 1,000 times. The flight logs contradict his public statements. The communications reveal Epstein's trust in his judgment. The Mar-a-Lago connections suggest evidence was being concealed. The Bannon communications extend the network into Trump's inner circle. Every element of the obstruction case now has documentary support from the very files Trump tried to suppress. Democrats drafting impeachment articles have more than enough material. They have evidence of a president who used his power to conceal his connections to a sex trafficker, who ordered subordinates to obstruct justice, who lied repeatedly about the nature of those connections, and who signed a transparency law while simultaneously working to undermine it. The 25th Amendment discussions that have been circulating among Trump's critics gain additional force from this disclosure. The argument for removal based on unfitness does not require proving criminal conduct beyond reasonable doubt. It requires demonstrating that the president's judgment is compromised, that his associations are disqualifying, that his pattern of deception renders him incapable of discharging the duties of his office. The Epstein files provide evidence for each of these propositions. A president who maintained extensive contact with a convicted sex offender, who lied about that contact for years, who used the powers of his office to conceal evidence of the relationship, and who modeled crisis management strategies that Epstein himself sought to emulate, is a president whose judgment and character are fundamentally incompatible with the responsibilities he holds. The political consequences extend beyond the formal mechanisms of impeachment and the 25th Amendment. Trump's base has remained loyal through every previous scandal because each could be framed as political persecution. The investigations were witch hunts. The prosecutors were partisans. The media was the enemy. The deep state was trying to destroy him. But the Epstein connection is different. Even Trump supporters despise Jeffrey Epstein. Even they believe sex trafficking is evil. Even they want justice for victims. Seeing Trump's name appear more than 1,000 times in Epstein's files, seeing Epstein ask what would Trump do, seeing the flight logs that contradict Trump's denials, that will shake some portion of his base. Not everyone. Many will deny the authenticity of the files or claim they are fabricated or insist they prove nothing, but some will have doubts. And in a political coalition that has already been eroding from judicial defeats and governing chaos, every defection matters. The senators who might once have feared primary challenges for crossing Trump now see a base that is smaller, less unified, and less capable of enforcing loyalty. The political cost of conviction shrinks as the base fractures. The betting markets that track Trump's likelihood of removal will adjust upward in response to this disclosure. They were already pricing in a significant chance of Trump leaving office before the end of his term. The combination of impeachment momentum, judicial defeats, military criticism, and collapsing public support had pushed those odds to levels that made political professionals nervous. The Epstein files add a new category of risk that markets had not fully priced in. Evidence of a relationship Trump spent years denying. Evidence of obstruction specifically targeting Epstein-related documents. Evidence that the classified documents case was actually about concealing Epstein connections. All of this increases the probability that something, whether impeachment or resignation or 25th Amendment invocation, will end Trump's presidency prematurely. The legal exposure that accompanies political vulnerability creates a feedback loop that accelerates the collapse. Every new revelation about Trump's Epstein connections creates potential criminal liability. The obstruction of the Mar-a-Lago search takes on new significance when the concealed evidence relates to a sex trafficker. The lies about the relationship become potential false statements charges. The use of Bondi and Patel to suppress the files becomes conspiracy to obstruct justice. And as the legal jeopardy increases, the incentive to fight rather than resign decreases. A president facing serious criminal exposure cannot simply walk away and expect the investigations to stop. He must either win politically or face the consequences legally. The Epstein files make winning politically much harder while simultaneously increasing the legal consequences of losing. The broader historical significance of this moment will become clearer with time. Future presidents will operate in the shadow of what the Epstein files reveal about the intersection of power, privilege, and protection. The network of influential people who shielded Epstein, who continued associating with him after his conviction, who helped him maintain his lifestyle and his access, is now partially exposed. The files do not name everyone. They do not answer every question. But they provide a documentary foundation for understanding how Epstein operated, who enabled him, and why accountability took so long to arrive. Trump's prominent presence in those files ensures that his legacy will be permanently associated with one of the most notorious sex traffickers in American history. Whatever else he accomplishes, whatever policies he implements, whatever judges he appoints, the historical record will note that Donald Trump's name appears more than 1,000 times in the Epstein files, that Epstein asked what would Trump do when facing exposure, and that Trump spent his presidency trying to hide evidence of their relationship. The immediate future holds only difficult choices for Trump. He can continue denying, but the files are public and the denials look increasingly desperate. He can attack the authenticity of the documents, but they come from government archives and court records with established chains of custody. He can claim persecution, but he signed the law that mandated their release. He can try to change the subject, but the magnitude of this story resists distraction. The Epstein files will dominate news coverage for weeks and months as journalists and researchers process the 3.5 million pages and 2,000 videos that have just become available. Every new discovery will generate headlines. Every previously unknown connection will fuel investigation. Every contradiction with Trump's public statements will provide material for impeachment and prosecution. There is no escaping this story. There is no spinning it. There is only the slow, grinding process of accountability working through institutions that Trump tried and failed to control. The update Trump feared has arrived. The Epstein files are public. His name is everywhere in them. The connections he spent years denying are documented in government records that cannot be wished away. The obstruction he ordered through Bondi and Patel has been exposed and defeated. The law he signed to appear transparent has become the instrument of his exposure. And all of it is accelerating toward a conclusion that seemed impossible when he took office but now appears increasingly inevitable. The presidency built on the promise of strength and invincibility is crumbling under the weight of evidence that its occupant is neither strong nor invincible. The Epstein files are the update he feared because they confirm what he always knew. The truth cannot be hidden forever. The documents exist. The witnesses remember. The archive preserves what powerful men try to erase. And when the moment of reckoning finally arrives, as it has now arrived for Donald Trump, there is nowhere left to hide.